I want you to listen to this man speak. His name is John Trudell. We understand that the issue is the land. The issue is the earth. We cannot change the political system. We cannot change the economic system. We cannot change the social system until the people control the land, and then we take it out of the hands of that sick minority that chooses to pervert the meaning and the intention of humanity.
There was trouble in Custer, South Dakota yesterday after
President Johnson transmits the bill to Congress as Attorney General.
The great lie is that it is civilization. It's not civilized. It has been literally the most bloodthirsty, brutalizing system ever imposed upon this planet. That is not civilization. That's the great lie, is that it represents civilization. That's the great lie. Or if it does represent civilization, and that's truly what civilization is, then the great lie is that civilization is good for us. But I think that we really need to put serious thought into understanding that we're dealing with a disease. You know, it's like there's this predator energy on this planet. And this predator energy feeds upon the essence of the spirit, feeds upon the essence of the human being, the spirit. Now, this predator energy can take fossil fuel and other resources out of the earth, turn it into fuel to run a machine system. But in order for there to be a need for that system, and in order for that system to work, they have to mine our minds to get at the essence of our spirit. In the same way the external mining takes place, it pollutes. We see now, people understand how it poisons the environment, the water, the air, pollution. The mining of the essence, the mining of the spirit, mining our minds, the pollution from that is all of the neurotic, distorted, insecure behavior patterns that we develop. That's the pollution. Because in order for this predatory system, this disease to work, we must not be able to use our minds in a clear, coherent manner. Because if we use our minds in a clear, coherent manner, we will not accept the unacceptable. But it's a disease, lives and travels through the mind, through the generations.
Seems like we do get it along those lines. Through Houston, I tuned to KPFT and heard what y'all were talking about, and I appreciate the candor or someone talking about that. So getting those calls meant a lot, and now that we are across, simulcast across a lot of platforms, getting the comments and the shares mean the world too, because as we get deeper in these stories, some of these stories, they're new. And we're coming to grips with this news and what's happening in our world. I know we've spent the last hours or so just talking about our own perspectives on conversations with people about what's going on and their reactions to it. So we definitely appreciate you all joining in the dialogue, for your contributions to the ideas, but also for the contributions that keep KPFT alive for another decade, 40 years, 50 years, as long as it's been going. So
yeah, and we're happy to have a place to talk about these ideas. We're going to get into some important news stories relevant to Houston, relevant to things going around. But first, we want to talk about, I guess, something that checks both those boxes, something relevant to Houston and a conversation taking place around the country. And that is, of course, the masks. So we're here in Houston. We're sitting at the same table. We're maybe with 6 feet apart. Maybe there's 6 feet between us.
I consider you guys my family unit.
Yeah, we're part of the same family unit, so we're not social distancing. But beginning this week, this Monday morning, so when you're hearing this on KPFT, it'll be Friday. We're broadcasting Tuesday. Just yesterday, a mask order went into place across the county. Now, this is different, though, than what happened before with the lockdown and stuff. This is the county judge, Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo, issuing an order saying that businesses are required to make their customers comply with wearing a mask. Like they're basically saying no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service,
or face a $1,000
fine. And so this is interesting because before, when the lockdowns happened, I was in Mexico, and that was more like the state and the federal government, everybody locking down. Now the state, in the form of Governor Greg Abbott, doesn't want to lock down, is not really encouraging it, but has allowed the local bodies to say, hey, well, we're going to pressure the businesses. And so that's the approach. And they've already said it's supposed to expire June 30th, but she's already said they're going to extend it, and that they're going to extend the emergency order, which is supposed to expire June 30th too. So
it's really weird you'd make something like that for just a week. I don't know. Like I don't understand like the scientific
Then you can
arbitrariness.
set the precedent of extending it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a good point. I mean, it's kind of weird too. I think people are still getting used to it. I actually tried to get a piece of cheesecake last night, and I unfortunately I forgot my mask, and I was trying to get they wouldn't serve me, but there's people in there without masks. There's people in there without masks, and they were eating and drinking. But they said I physically can't serve you. Like you have to go over there and take your mask off and eat. And so I'm like, I mean, where is the consistency? Like, because before they canceled all dine-in eatings, so you would assume that they would cancel dine-in, but they're just saying just wear a mask and then just go take it off and go in the corner. So like, how is that consistent?
Well, I know we don't really have time in this show. Maybe we could do another show, or maybe after the first hour, getting into some of the I guess the science of the debate around the mask, because there are, just to be clear, those hearing this, there are studies showing that the masks are not as effective as we're told. But then, of course, other people can pull out their studies and say, hey, here's where it's showing the spread. But I think that, as usual, our position is like the state shouldn't be getting involved and shouldn't be forcing businesses to comply to do this. And a lot of the businesses have been closed down for the last couple months and have been, some of them are barely hanging on. So they're not really willing to risk, and maybe don't have the funds to say, okay, well, I'm going to try to skirt that and maybe face a fine. For some businesses, that could be the end of them. If they get a fine, not only that, but the reputation going on right now. And that's kind of what I talk about more, is like the mentality, the shaming. And Johnny, I know that you've been kind of just trying to have a conversation, I think, with some of the people that you're connected with in Houston through social media, and asking questions about like the statistics and the reports of the fatalities and just different things on that. I want you to talk about that. Like, what do you think? I mean, are you getting a good response? Obviously, you've been getting in a lot of arguments. Just trying to express your opinions,
it's been weird because, the CDC came out and has changed their numbers time and time again, and now the death rate officially sits somewhere around 0.2%, right? 0.02%. I wish I had the article pulled up right here, but it was significantly less than what we thought, but it's still severe and it's still infectious. It's basically equivalent to like a really bad flu. But on top of that, we know for a fact that the hospitals are showing higher death rates than possibly normal, as well as the fact there's more studies coming out saying that the infection rate is likely higher than normal, due to the fact that most people are in fact asymptomatic. About like 80% of people are asymptomatic. So I was just trying to bring up the fact that maybe they lied to us, or maybe they were misleading us, and I'm just getting so much blowback. I'm getting called and having a lot of issues where people are attacking the sources of the articles instead of actually reading the facts and addressing what's going on, because it's plain as day, and the WHO coming out with saying that asymptomatic transfer of the disease is rare. So I'm not saying that nobody should take precautions, but I'm trying to have an actual conversation saying like, okay, we saw this disease that came out early and our projections were huge. So we freaked out and we locked everything down. But now we're seeing, with more data, more hard data, and not just estimates, we're seeing that it wasn't quite as severe as we thought. Should we talk about rolling these things back? Or should we talk about exiting this? Or should we talk about changing the strategy and focusing less on asymptomatic people, because that's really what I'm thinking is part of the solution. I think we've personally just failed our nursing homes, and we've failed a lot of other high-risk areas, when we didn't catch it early. And I don't know.
It seems like
it's complicated, and everyone's got their experts, like you always say.
Yeah, like they're pulling out their experts. We can pull ours, and again, like you said, people are trying to make it like it's a right-wing issue. I even had somebody comment on my social media who I don't think they even said like, "Hey, I'm not trying to attack anybody, educate me, but I'm from Australia," and I thought that only the Trump supporters question the masks thing because that's how the media has already framed it, like a right and left type of thing.
It's really
so somebody from the outside is just like, oh, that person must be a Trump supporter, but this person follows me and knows I'm not. So they were kind of like, hey, hold on. I thought that, and that's the perception that
Johnny asked a question, and I went ahead and checked it because I wanted to see what the most current stats were of the percentages. And let's say we have 350 million people in the United States. I think that's a good number. Then about 3% of the people they're saying have contracted it. And out of that, 0.019 have died.
So yeah, just under 0.02, and it actually does vary in different places. So like if you think about it, New York has a higher, there's going to be more cases like that. So if you go to rural areas, that number could drop even further.
So I want on the mask thing. I'm looking at a study here. I posted this to some people I was talking about on social media. This is from Singapore back in May. And it said, this is a quote from it. It says, the study estimates that this infectious period of SARS-CoV-2, which is what COVID-19 is really the real name of it, starts 2.3 days before onset of symptoms. So 2.3 days before you get symptoms is the infectious period, and then peaking at 0.7 days and declining within 7 days. So if you get it and you are asymptomatic, there's this study and others that are showing that it's a period that passes. It's not like just this indefinite period where like,
you're
just like permanently, asymptomatic. But the thing is, and I get like people say, yeah, but if you don't know you have symptoms and you're going out, then you wouldn't know if you're passing them, right? So then the idea is if you just lock it down all the time and always wear a mask, then no matter when you may have it, you prevent it. And I mean, that's what they're trying to make. But there are other studies talking about the questionable nature of, and kind of what you're pointing at. If we know the numbers are much lower than we were told, the death rate, if we know the infection rate, maybe the infection rate is high.
By their own accord.
Yeah, by their own, they're saying like the infection rate is high to some degree, and they're even saying
it's higher.
They've had it way before we were told too, even that it was spreading around then, which would mean way more people have it and have had it and probably got better already. I know people who told me, I think I got this thing back in October. I had really sick, like I never before for like 2 weeks.
I thought I did in December.
So there's people who've had that experience, and we now know that it was likely spreading in different parts of the world. We still don't know the whole, true story. So my point is that like, if we don't consider those things and we just blindly, okay, I'll put on a mask, I'll just do this. I get that people, I've personally stopped saying that everybody who's doing it is afraid. And I know that some of our commenters have said that because I've talked to people who I know personally who say, I'm not afraid. Like I see the same things you see. I'm questioning it. I don't think it should be forced, but they're coming from a place of compassion.
So if you are,
at least they believe it's a compassion thing.
That's where I'm kind of a stickler. Cause like, you know what I mean? Like not a stickler, but like I'm saying, like, that's where I'm on the fence, I suppose. Like, because if someone would like really want me to feel like on a personal level would feel more comfortable if I was wearing a mask, I might consider it differently. But like, it's just the force part. And, if you do want to be compassionate, there's nothing against that. And, more power to you. But like,
you're free to be compassionate.
Let's be honest about the facts, and like, I don't know. There are different sides to the story, and it's a questionable how effective the masks technically are due to the fact that asymptomatic transfers is actually rare. So if you're not going around coughing on people, it's unlikely you would transfer it.
One thing about the masks that I think is really interesting is you've got this one individual telling all these, and look how it works for society, as you were talking about there, $1,000 fine. All these companies can't afford $1,000 fine on top of barely paying employees, trying to get loans from the government to stay in business. So let me just get to this real quick. So they got all these small businesses acting as police on one another. It's like in order to even be open. So I think that's kind of like, I think that's a bad turn in general. And you've got this from the one judge. I had this article I did hope we'd get a little bit of time to get into in the local about the COVID relief fund. But the thing about the masks that I want to get into before that a little bit, and this touches on the masks, right? Because it's COVID, and it's how insidious this is reaching all of us, and how, like you were talking about, you were in that grocery store and it came over the speaker. We're all in this together, and all this, all us, the group, the collective, us, land practically. But the point is, think about it. The mask touches all of us. All of us will be touched by the mask if we choose to go anywhere. We'll all succumb to the mask in order to go places. And the point on this is, look, at that point, we're all believing it was this big to cause this. And in memory and in history, when we go, what caused that collapse? We'll all remember putting those masks on. Why did the economy collapse? It was nothing to do with that it was never going to work in the first place, but it was those masks. We've all went through the motions, the ritual, putting the mask on, I think that's important aspects of these things that we don't often talk about like that. So.
I wanna just read from one thing real quick. I'm showing on screen before we get into the Harris County COVID relief. This is I think one of the most recent things I've seen. June 1st, 2020. If you're watching live, you're seeing it on screen. It says how many COVID-19 patients have no symptoms, more than you might think. Multiple studies indicate that a significant portion of COVID-19 patients are asymptomatic, and that could mean the disease's fatality rate is lower than previously thought. Research suggests many patients infected with new coronavirus are asymptomatic. So it goes on saying new studies increasingly are suggesting that the number of people who are infected with the new coronavirus don't exhibit symptoms is higher than previously understood. For one study published Wednesday, a couple Wednesdays ago in JAMA Network Open, researchers examined 78 patients in China who tested positive for coronavirus and found that 42% of them do not exhibit symptoms. According to the studies, these were more likely to be women, 20s, 30s, and 40s. And, so it goes on from there. And they just show a couple different studies. Another published in Thorax included cases, 217 people who were on a cruise ship from Australia to Antarctica. 59% of them were tested positive. Only 19% showed symptoms. And they go into other examples and just basically saying what the findings mean is that the fatality rate is likely to be much, much lower than what we've been told. Says further, experts say incorrect counts of patients who've been infected with new coronavirus and survived could throw off coronavirus's estimated fatality rate. According to this SHOTS report, it says having a significant amount of asymptomatic COVID-19 patients who survive the disease but aren't counted could mean that COVID's actual fatality rate is significantly lower than current estimates suggest. And it goes on, they have a doctor from Johns Hopkins saying the current best estimates for the infection rate are between 0.5 and 1%, which is dramatically lower than the U.S.'s own calculated rate of 5.9%. So even, these studies, the research is showing that the United States' own numbers that they're putting forward are not accurate, which again, they say the U.S. is calculating according to coronavirus. You can go to the website. I'll put the link there. It's the Johns Hopkins University showing that it's 0.5 to 0.1 or to 1%, not 5.9 or 6 or 7 or 8 or anything like that. And that's just as recent as June 1st. So people hearing this who are skeptical or think that we're crazy for challenging these things, this is why. If we're still getting these facts, I guess people could say we got to err on the side of caution. And, I can't tell you how many times I've been called selfish the last couple of days that, making the choice to say that I believe in choice when it comes to masks.
But they say it like it's a bad thing. Selfish.
Well, caring about oneself, I guess, right? But it goes back to what you were talking about, the collective, though.
Well, I mean, dude, I had a problem.
Yeah, it's a collective. You're selfish, see? You're not in it for all of us. You're in it for you and your little fashion statement of not wearing a mask. We know it's not that. And that's the other thing, right? A lot of people say, like, if you even question it, it's like the anti-vaxxer thing. If you're questioning where these lines are and how it can be 8 feet in Europe and 6 feet here and all these things that defy, as Johnny was pointing out, systematized scientific understanding, all of a sudden, you don't believe in the virus even existing. It's one of those.
They take it to the extreme.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess that's the consequence of not having open dialogue. Right?
I thought one of the worst parts, another thing that they'll say you align with the right on, which this is a crazy argument in my opinion, is that if you want the country to reopen, you're actually hurting the lower classes because you're forcing them to go back to jobs where they are going to potentially be exposed to the disease. When in reality, I truly feel like the middle class America is just bleeding right now. I mean, and there's so many people without work that would never be without a job, and they might not have more specialized skills. And I don't know. I just see that as a long-term effect that people really are not thinking about, like 100,000 small businesses going away. Like, it's not the rich that are just like, oh, I need to make my money, so you better work and risk yourself. It's the rich
those guys are
sitting
getting
back.
bailed
They're
out.
sitting on their piles of money right now.
They just got new
chilling,
piles.
while we cannot make money. We physically can't make that much money. Like, everyone's businesses are being affected, and the bottom's going to be the bottom. It's the bottom. Like,
Yeah.
why do you think that that's somehow like?
But it's
you're
been
not-
a long time since America saw it.
And what? We're going to wait for another bailout. We're going to really wait
That
for
just
another
makes the
bailout.
bottom
that-
deeper, though.
And yeah, I mean, it's terrible, and try to build dependency when there's people who would much rather work for themselves.
But it's for the good of all, Johnny.
Yeah.
So I want to do one thing
Put this
just
together.
to remind everybody that if you're hearing this is Freethinker Radio. In case you didn't know, this is going to be airing again on Friday. Or you might maybe listening right now on 90.1 KPFT. We're recording it on Tuesday, and we are going to take phone calls. So if people want to call in, maybe the second half of the show after we play a song here in a few minutes, you can call in. We're going to use the number 713-909-0382. We're just going to do the phone call and put it up to the mic and see if it works, and try to get some of the audience connection again.
So what do we
because
got going
we
on
want
in the
people to
chat?
talk. You know,
Anything happening in the chat so far that seems?
Callie recognized what we were saying. She said collectivism cancels itself out because there's no collective good without individual rights being respected, which I really appreciate. And other people commenting about the same thing, whether they question the danger of the virus. And somebody says I'm angry. I think I can say pissed. Can I
Yeah.
say pissed?
No, you can't. You can't say that.
no,
on
wait,
edit
radio.
that one out.
Okay, we'll have to edit that out for the
Yeah,
radio.
that's what you're not allowed to say the piss word.
So we'll take that out. For
There
the
it
radio.
is again.
Take all that out for the radio. Somebody says they're angry at the thought of their daughter growing up like this. And, like this, I think people need to understand, like, the world that we've been talking about for the past couple of months. This whole thing started, the push for immunity passports, digital certificates. Mike, I read this article yesterday, and I did a video about it, talking about contact tracing. There was a writer for Forbes that was literally saying that privacy is in the way right now, and that it's just these pesky people and
bet it is.
their privacy protections and decentralization. And he basically literally said, you either have privacy or you have good contact tracing to stop this virus. We can't have one, and these stupid people who are pushing for decentralization and privacy are standing in the way of us getting accurate testing. He said what we need to have: mandatory lockdowns, social distancing, contact tracing on the phones. He said you should have a QR code to enter and travel that will, if you're healthy, if the contact tracing app says you came near somebody,
They have this.
your QR code is revoked, and then you can't enter the building, right?
This is going on.
It's happening in China, and so this is the world that when somebody says I'm angry at the thought of my daughter growing up like this, and somebody might hear that and say, what do you mean? Like, we're just dealing with the virus, you guys are making it so much worse. Like with 9/11, we're talking about the implications of where this is headed and what's happening. And we've got some more info we want to get into in just a bit. But Micah, while we're on local news, I know you did have this one on the relief that relates to what we were talking about with people needing some.
We can finally get off that rant.
I think it's interesting because we've hit a lot of economic aspects of this last episode. I feel like we were finally able to do some justice, because I think part of putting the mask on and bowing to COVID all the time is to have it to blame for everything. Okay. But it turns out that somehow Harris County, I know things are doing great here monetarily, but somehow they've got $30 million to give out to people that have been hurt from COVID, laid off, different things like that, having rent problems. And this has just begun. This is the second round of giving the money out. The sum is 30 million. I don't know if they did 15 and 15 because it doesn't really break it down. But Tuesday of this week at 6 a.m., that's when it starts. The application period opens at 6 a.m. June 23rd and closes at 10 p.m. June 24th. So if you're hearing this on FM radio, you missed your chance if you didn't know. But see, applicants can apply. They're telling you by phone or online. They have 2 rounds, 30 million total. And they're going to, it's not enough. They're not even going to pretend like it's enough. Residents who are at or below 60% of the area's median income, which is about $45,000 for a family of 4 to qualify. People on services such as SNAP, domestic violence victims, and others who are experiencing homelessness also qualify. If you're unsure if you qualify, go ahead and apply, is what they say. Applicants who want help filling out the form, they can get help filling out the form. But the application is not first come, first serve. After the portal closes, qualified applicants will be put in lottery process, with the most at risk getting priority. Applicants from vulnerable census tract are up to 50% more likely to receive aid. So what is a vulnerable census tract? The city of Houston's rental relief portal, which distributes $15 million on a first come, first served basis, closed after just 90 minutes. That's how much it got hit.
I'm sure.
Oftentimes it's a crisis. There's a tendency to go with a first in, first out model. And this time they didn't do this. So there's some evaluative process, that phrase that I mentioned earlier. Applicants will find out Friday whether they will receive those funds. So that's
I thought it was funny. Didn't they just increase the police budget by about $30 million?
Yeah, the cops are getting almost $1 billion.
Yeah, so but they couldn't shave any extra, I guess.
No extra funds to help you out with your, your business tanking or just being out of work and trying to take care of those medical bills or different things like that. I mean, it's very real out there. I want to mention one just briefly locally. This Dr. Peter Hotez, some of you may be familiar with him. He's been on Joe Rogan and elsewhere before. And he was quoted from a tweet that actually I had an interesting interaction with him the last couple of days. But he basically said that Houston is about to become the worst affected city in the U.S. if the trend continues. And this is as the number of hospitalizations in Texas continues to reach record highs. Like today, they said for the first time since this all began that Texas had 5,000 new cases in one day. They're saying that's the worst it's been. And according to County Judge Lena Hidalgo, Dr. Peter Hotez, who's a professor and dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine, and other people, that Houston and Texas in general is headed to be one of the worst places in the country. He said today, or a couple days ago on Twitter, "My observations, if this trajectory persists, Houston would become the new worst affected city in the U.S., maybe rival what we're seeing now in Brazil. The masks equals a good first step, but simply won't be enough. We would need to proceed to red alert," he said. And he shows a graph of the rising cases. And then, he also made a tweet basically calling what he called anti-vaxxers, like anti-science people. And he was showing a picture of a protesting contact tracing and things like that. And just made some ridiculous comments. And I kind of had a back and forth with him on Twitter, but basically just, we've talked about this guy before. We tried to have him on the show whenever every time we talk about vaccines, a lot of people have a lot to say about this topic. So, it's a heated topic. There's a lot of issues.
He won't come on the show.
He won't debate anybody. I mean, that's the thing is he said on Joe Rogan, he doesn't think that, quote, anti-vaxxers, which I'm sure we would be labeled at just for saying that maybe people should have a choice, that they don't deserve the time of day because then you give them credibility when they don't need credibility, basically. So he's like, if I talk to them, well, then people might listen to their ideas, and that's not going to happen. So
you can't have that battle of ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just interesting because this guy has now become like really a face for the COVID-19 response in a lot of ways. And he's, of course, right here in Houston, the Baylor College of Medicine, and he was on CNN yesterday saying this. So I tried to talk to him.
Another question. I wonder if we do still have these case increases, will that death rate, being low, still continue to show, or will the death rate kind of stack on top of itself? Because I don't know. I'm just thinking if we don't see a spike in the death rate, then it's still going to be the most vulnerable people who are going to be passing away. So it sounds like Texas needs to really reanalyze what we're doing in our most vulnerable situations, people who have pre-existing conditions and people in nursing homes.
Yeah, and this is what I was saying earlier, is instead of locking the whole world down and forcing everybody and forcing business and threatening this and that, whatever, why not? And this is what we've seen the doctors in Sweden and elsewhere who took a different approach say, we need to focus on the nursing homes, focus on the people who are at risk and the immunocompromised. And other people have pointed out, there are a lot of overweight people in the United States. There's a lot of diabetes. There's a lot of sick people. And maybe that's another big issue we should address too. I'm not saying hey, let's go shame people, but at the same time, let's be real.
There's other ways.
There are people who are not healthy. There are people who are not healthy. And so if a pandemic of whatever, strength, I know we can question
let's
the
talk
true
about
strength of it.
Strengthen your immune system.
And that's what I'm saying is, so if you're eating crappy, if you're not getting exercise, you're not eating healthy, and then you're locking down, you're staying inside, you're wearing masks and all this stuff, it's hard to see how you're going to build up an immune system and strengthen up. But I think it's time for us to go to a music break. When we get back, guys, we're going to talk more. I don't know if you heard this. Anthony Fauci is saying, yes, the virus is coming by the end of 2020 or 2000. Not the virus, the vaccine. The virus is already here, right?
Doesn't these guys tell stories a lot?
Yeah, so, we're supposed to trust the same people who told us a couple months back that 200,000 Americans were going to be dead within 2 weeks back in April. And now they're saying they're going to push the vaccine out. They're going to compress 10 years of vaccine vaccine research
Don't
into
worry about it.
less than a year.
They shut down all of Main Street. They shut your businesses and dreams down. But guess what? The federal government and the Federal Reserve working together, and they've got a loan for you to go into debt to get you through it.
They're going to take care of you guys. We're going to listen to a requested song. People liked this last time we played. I think they enjoyed it. They thought it was
timely,
weird.
and it's
The
very
video's
creative.
a little weird, and it's cool.
from a Houston artist that's been on the show before, that's played numerous shows at the House of Jay and at for the community and other events we've hosted, benefit shows. So he's near and dear to our heart, and we're glad to share the music. That's a big part of this show, and we look to do that more often. So if you've got some music you'd like us to get out, send it to us, please.
All right, we'll be right back. This is Freethinker Radio, 90.1 KPFT Houston.
Sanitary Lynn is so spicky and spam. Sanitary Lynn has a glove on his hand. Sanitary Lynn is so spicky and spam. Sanitary Lynn has a glove on his hand. A glove on his hand. A glove on his hand. Sanitary Lynn has a glove on his hand. Yes, and a glove on his hand. He's an old man that befriended you, and he sets up cardboard boxes in his living room. Oh, Sanitary Lenny sets up cardboard boxes and practices shooting them with his gun. Sanitary Lenny drove a truck. He drove a truck around the country when he was young. Has a wife, she left him a long time ago. Doesn't give a damn anymore. Sanitary Lenny begins fan. Sanitary Lenny has a glove on his hand. Yeah, it's a glove on his hand. Glove on his hand. Sanitary Lenny has a glove on his hand. Doing donuts with his gas-powered golf cart in the parking lot late at night. Sanitary Lenny doesn't sleep. Sanitary Lenny will not bite. Sanitary Lenny keeps it clean. Sanitary Lenny keeps it nice. That's his job. Better not get in his way, or he will move you out of the way and clean you up. Sanitary Lenny's so spaghetti and spam. Sanitary Lenny has a glove on his hand. Sanitary Lenny's so spaghetti and spam. Sanitary Lenny has a glove on his hand. A glove on his hand. Glove on his hand. Sanitary Lenny has a glove on his hand. Glove on his hand. Glove on his hand. Sanitary Lenny has a glove on his hand. Sanitary Lenny has a glove on his hand. Glove on his hand. Glove on his hand.
One.
All right, you're listening to KPFT Houston, Freethinker Radio. You just heard Darwin's Pinches, Sanitary Lanny, a timely song to say the least. So we got I think we've gotten through most of our local that we're going to get into. I do know that they released the video to the family of Nicholas Chavez. We covered this story earlier in past episodes. This is the individual who was on his knees in a 15-minute encounter with the police. He'd been shot already, and he's on his knees, and he reaches for his chest, and multiple officers shoot him. 5 officers shoot at him, and they were fearing for their lives. They say in the statement, the father, 51-year-old father, has a different point of view. He claims it was an execution. I think one of the main things that came out of this story that, we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but it's in the Texas Tribune. So I think that's kind of interesting. Houston's getting beyond itself as usual in the news coverage of the police's actions here. It's probably because there's such a big population and 5,000 police and a budget of $1 billion or something. I don't know. But yeah, it turns out that they're saying that increased scrutiny from activists is making people question the narratives. And one of the things that I think is the main point of bringing out, besides the unfortunate possible execution of this individual, is let's talk a moment about the role of these cameras and whether they're actually used to help
Body cameras?
Yes, whether they're actually used to help monitor the police or if they're used more to construct narratives. And according to the Texas Tribune, most of the camera footage that we see of police misconduct comes from cell phone videos and not from police body cameras. So it seems that would refute that whole argument that 5 years ago or whatever, if we just got enough cameras on cops, we'd know what was happening. It turns out the cameras have to be in the citizens' hands for some reason. So
and it's interesting though, because that really came out of the 2014, which was the creation of the Black Lives Matter movement in Ferguson and other shootings that were like Eric Garner and all these different deaths that were happening. And the big push from that, or the big, reform was, okay, well, let's get body cameras, and that started spreading everywhere, right? And then, like you said, now we're here at this point where they obviously haven't really stopped killings, and even videotaping with our phones doesn't stop people from getting killed. And I worry that
maybe we should have some kind of like Facebook for cops who can just log in and watch their body camera for the past week.
Honestly, I've argued before that if they're going to have body cameras, there should be, think about a website that the people have access to, where every single officer that's on the street at that point, you could literally just go on there and log in and see while they're on duty, and maybe there's ways okay, they got to go take a leak or something like that. But generally, while they're on duty and they're in their car and they're driving around, that the people could literally just sit there and watch live streams of what the cops are seeing. I guarantee you would see changes in the police behavior if you start having the ability to hold them accountable. And you can hey guys, look, we have video of this cop dropping drugs in somebody's, the different times that they do get caught. It's by some accident. They didn't realize their body camera was actually recording or something like that.
Or like in Goins' case, they have something go awry, and then they look at them and they find out it's been a decade of misconduct.
Well, and somebody said earlier, and I've seen this as well, where some cops have been instructed or told they're allowed to during protests, to not wear the body cameras. We've seen that on the streets before, or that they turn them off, And when I got arrested a few weeks ago, there was people questioning the cops because some of them weren't having that. Others of them, and we've seen this too, covering their name and their badge number and stuff like that. And I mean, those kind of things, you hear about them, and it's unless you have money to go get a lawyer to try to do something, it just happens and nobody does anything, and it just continues.
Your name and badge number if you're an officer. If you're standing up for right and justice, wouldn't you be proud of that and be willing to sign your name on it? And if you're not, then I need to think those are the officers need to ask themselves what they are serving, because it does seem that if you're serving right and justice, that you shouldn't have a problem saying your name. There's been times, we talk about controversial stuff on here. There's been times when authorities said, "We got your number," that I was like, how serious is this? But at the same time, you sign your name on something at the end of the day, and if they're hiding their name, that ought to show you where there's some conflict. There's some concern. What, if you know their name, you're going to find them? I mean, come on.
Well, I want to remind everybody we are taking calls if anybody wants to try to call in this evening, 713-909-0382. We've got about 20 minutes left in the KPFT version of the show, and we'll do a little bit extra, even though we started late. We're sorry. It's, again, 713-909-0382. And if you're listening on Friday on KPFT, please don't call that number because it's not – this is pre-KPFT.
We miss being able to say.
But we look forward to being back in the studio.
Johnny, wherever you are out there, waiting to complain to me.
We miss all our old regular callers.
MOD.
MOD and other people and everybody else who wants to call in.
And the people there at the station, coming in, signing in, and the various fund drive things that go on and the gimmies that we're able to give away and having just steady equipment. KPFT is a great resource in Houston, and we just look forward to being able to access the building again.
Absolutely. So I'm going to just jump forward a little bit just to remind you guys, as we said before the break, Anthony Fauci, of course, the part of the National Institute of Health and the director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, said today, Tuesday, in testimony in front of the House, said that they are not slowing down testing for COVID-19 and that they are still on timeline to have a vaccine ready by the end of 2020 or early 2021. And I just want to throw that out there, to our listeners and anybody who wants to call in on any topic, of course. But if you do want to call in, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how you feel about the push for a vaccine being rushed forward at this level. And I've had people with comments on social media.
Vaccine.
Yeah, a novel
for
a novel virus, right? That they're pushing forward at a rate we've never seen. And I've had folks who say that they're like pro-vaccine, but this one they're like, I'm not going near this vaccine if it's being rolled out that quick, Operation Warp Speed, and all that sort of thing. So I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that. But we talked about Micah talking about the police and just COVID-19. I think it's interesting because these topics clearly are connected in some ways. When you talk about police violence, growing police state, and you talk about the push for contact tracing and other forms of
Well, some of the
health
very
surveillance,
people who
you know.
want you surveilled want to talk about, defunding the police. And I might be willing to talk about defunding the police. Let's have that conversation. But, how are you going to, I have a real concern about these people that are they typically want all the authoritarian tactics, but then they want to defund the police. So that really troubles me because they want the police there to make sure I have a mask on and to, make sure.
If the cops are enforcing a fine on a business, that's fine.
Yeah, but defund the police. I just think that's a little conflict that some people need to start thinking out a little bit because I don't know, it's particularly perturbing.
Yeah, so I want to jump ahead to this one here: biosurveillance, invisible borders, and the dangerous after effects of COVID-19 measures. This is coming from OpenDemocracy.net. It says, long after the COVID-19 pandemic is over, we may continue to be affected by its residual of ultra sophisticated technologies, biosurveillance. And I've never heard that term before, but I think I've been saying health surveillance, but I think maybe biosurveillance is accurate. Again, this is from Open Democracy, and they're talking about many of the things we've been talking about the push for QR codes,
the ID 2020,
ID 2020, and the push for biometric e-passports. There's the COVID pass, there's the Clear Health Pass,
the App Eject.
Those are
those vaccines that have a microchip on top of the vaccine, not inside of it,
to track the vaccine,
to track where and when it was done. Load that up to a smartphone.
So this, just to read this briefly, it says it's talking about e-passports with an electronic chip embedded in them, and it says such embedded information includes a digital photo that can be verified against vast unseen databases. While the chip deployed in biometric devices is passive, it does not transmit or track any information, or at least that's what they claim. It is possible to imagine a more Orwellian future whereby active tracking devices are involved. I don't think you have to think that hard to imagine that. And then just here it says, what's more, and this is where we're moving to, global entry fast tracks, which are already popular in Asia, Europe, and North America, rely on biometric ID using your face, fingerprints, or iris recognition rather than traditional border inspection. Government officials foresee a future whereby arriving and departing passengers will not require any travel documents at all. You'll just use your face. Instead, biometric borders will come to play a key role in the politics of mobility management, turning the bodies of migrants and travelers into the sites of regulation of movement and risk prediction. And, it goes further into this, talking about Bluetooth and just there's some other aspects up here. And it's all cutting edge, new technology they get into, but they're actually calling attention to the threats. And then just one second one that kind of comments on the similar thing. This is from The Conversation, which if you've never heard of them, they tend to do, I would say, pretty balanced stuff. Police should not have access to data from coronavirus contact tracing apps. And I think this is something that we've been exploring already for the last couple months, what contact tracing is. And I know people have been saying on their phones that they looked at their phone, and if you have an Android, you go to settings, you go to general settings, go under Google services, and right there's a thing that says COVID-19 notifications, exposure notifications. You click on that. Right now it's telling me mine's off, that it's not actively using my Bluetooth to tell me if I'm near people who might have been exposed. But that was all loaded up. The new iPhone update has that. So, the apps aren't out yet. They're supposed to be developed by the cities and states and the governments. But Apple and Google have already put them in the phone. So this is just waiting for an app to work with.
Have you also seen the rings for the NBA players?
Oh, I did see that.
So there's now some kind of predictive. I don't know if you could pull it up really quick.
Yeah, I think I have that.
It's some kind of predictive technology. So we're talking about medical it's not really pre-crime because I guess you didn't commit a crime.
Infection.
Yeah, pre-virus. I don't know. They're gonna tell you 3 days before you get sick through a ring, and I think it's similar to, probably going to be like a Fitbit type thing with some added features.
Yeah, it detects heart rate, temperature, and sleep patterns. We're showing it on the screen if you're watching.
How long will it be until it's illegal to take that off?
I mean, of course, they're going to just run that out through the sports stuff.
Well, because they want their checks.
If you can put a mask on, you can put a chip on.
Well, the NBA will bend over for anybody. We saw.
Well, this is what I'm saying is when it comes, people want their sports, right? People want to watch it. People want to make money off it. These people probably want to earn their paycheck and play. and you are on a contract with one of these agencies. You can't just say, hey, no, I'm not going to comply. They're like, you signed a contract, you got to play, and well, we can force you to do X, Y, and Z if you want to play.
You got to wear what we tell you to wear.
Exactly. So if that means you got to get a chip, you want to wear a ring, you want to have a QR code, whatever, they got to comply because
Your
they're
biostats monitored 24/7 for the rest of your life.
And that's the other way that they will normalize some of this technology. So again, this one from the conversation is talking about
a bad parent if you don't get your kids chipped.
The legal precedents for that this is setting. It says right
How
here.
do you find them if you get lost?
It says that a BC provincial court held that society's interest in protecting the confidentiality of records outweighs the objective of police investigation, as disclosure of patient and research information in furtherance of a criminal investigation would, quote, erode ability to maintain it. It's basically just saying there was a court ruling that was protecting people's personal records, and how data collection with coronavirus now and contact tracing is challenging that. And obviously we know that there's a privacy risk here. So my point is that these stories are out there, but it's not just the technology. The final thing I want to mention in regards to this is the Karens that everybody keeps hearing about, right? Well, I've got a new one.
The Karens.
This is coming from Activist Post via Mass Private Eye, and it's talking about a new report from AP News. So this is, mainstream press, about volunteer Hawaiian groups who are turning suspected quarantine rule breakers into the police. It says a former reporter named Angela Keene and her Facebook group of snitches spy on vacationers' social media pages looking for incriminating pictures. When the members of her Facebook group spot tourists posting about their beach trips on social media, she zeroes in on the photos for clues like license plate numbers she can run down and distinctive furnishings she can match up with vacation rental listings. Her group of volunteers have spread across the Hawaiian Islands, leading to the arrests of 35 vacationers so far. So far, these volunteer sleuths with their group Hawaii Quarantine Kapu Breakers, kapu can mean rules in Hawaiian, has helped find about 13 people on one island, 22 people on the Big Island who were arrested by police. Members on other islands assisted with other cases that led to other arrests. And there's apparently a depressing 90-minute video showing what this woman does, where she describes it and I guess brags about it. And it just basically says, imagine going to Hawaii for vacation and being arrested because a group of volunteers sent your pictures, license plate information, and whatever else they could find out about you and your family to the police.
And you might not even really know.
These are people who probably didn't understand.
You're on vacation.
Like, that is crazy. That is crazy. That's crazy, man.
Just trying to chill.
See something,
Daddy, don't get arrested, please.
But this is a result of the see something, say something mentality. Like, straight up. Since 9/11, that's the stuff they've been cramming into people's heads. Like, and people who were born after 9/11 have been hearing that their whole lives. Anytime they've gone to airport, travel, anything like that, buses, and even in the Houston City buses, you see it. If you see something, say something. You see something, say something.
Why not just mind your own business? Can that be our new fucking motto?
Well, we got to edit that effing part out. But other than that, we should be all right.
So just to wrap this up, it says the group also tracked down visitors who rented a Mustang through a company that loans out private owner vehicles. When arriving at the airport, they listed the car owner's address as where they would spend quarantine, but the group found them at a short-term vacation rental. Like, literally just, like, this is insane. Oh, man. And it goes on to mention that the Department of Homeland Security and the city of New Orleans are creating a new normal by forcing bars and restaurants to collect customers' personal information. According to the mayor, we know everyone is eager to reopen. It's going to go back to normal. They're literally saying it. It's not going to go back to, this is the mayor of New Orleans. It's not going to go back to normal. It's what we're calling the new normal. It will be the data and not the date that drives not only the decision, but the phase. Today, we're outlining what those guidelines are. And those guidelines were that bars and restaurants have to collect personal information from their customers in case, they want to track one of them down or whatever. It's crazy, dude. Like, what the hell is going on?
Well, the super sleuths, and it's and what did we say the death rate was again?
It was like 0.9,
less than 0.02% of the people.
What are we doing? What are we doing? I mean, we're really rolling all that out. 3%
of the population or something, even if it grew.
Like, does no one really think that could go wrong? I mean,
they don't.
Down the line, you don't see how that could possibly be misused.
Heroes.
Could be misused like so many other things were misused.
I do think it's like that. They don't think about it. They don't think. I mean, they think they're doing something good, that these are horrible, bad people spreading the disease around. That's how simple they have people thinking now. And maybe it's the 5 media stations that control the flow. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
I really do wonder what the refusal process will be for the contact tracers when they knock on your door. Because do they have a warrant?
No, and this is the thing.
Do they have a warrant? Like, do I have to talk to you? You're not a cop.
We'll see how things come down when it actually happens, right? When we get this whole army of contact tracers, as they're calling. But the way they're promoting it now is they're like, it's voluntary. I mean, you don't even have to tell them the truth. You don't have to answer anything to them. But wait till the first person that they found out didn't give them accurate information, and then that led to somebody getting sick. And then they're like, well, now we got to find people.
Down some stairs on his way home.
In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they'd always talk about East Germany and the wall, and they made, I'm sure it's before your time, but you might even remember historically the wall coming down. But before that, there was a group there that was called the Stasi, and they were basically the secret police, and they sought, quote, to know everything about everyone. And see, this seemed that back then, Americans of that time thought that was a bad thing. It seems like the Americans of today, at least these ones that we're seeing really loud on social media, would just love the Stasi and knowing everything about everyone because it's for safety.
And let's not. No, I don't even have to bring it up.
We got about 5 minutes or so till we go to the final closing song
Cool.
for KPFT. You want to hit your economic stories, Mike?
Yeah, let's get into this a little bit because
Economic stories.
I know I've made some arguments that the economy is the economy, stupid, right? But the fact of the matter is unprecedented amounts of money are being spent. Unprecedented things such as this names of small business borrowers from the Paycheck Protection Program won't be released. Let's think about this for a second. A guy who worked at Goldman Sachs now is the secretary of
We had some missed calls. I'm sorry. If you guys want to call back, I wasn't paying attention.
Derrick.
Derrick.
You had missed calls.
Anyway, while
Why
Derrick
don't you
looks
call
for
him
what
back?
he's missing, I'll continue on this story.
Go for it.
So basically, let's just get going. The small business borrowers from the Paycheck Protection Program that they talked all about, like this was the one for Main Street, right? The banksters got their trillions for the Fed to start buying corporate junk bonds and all this stuff, trillions of dollars, right? But they had this like $500 billion, half a trillion that was going to the Paycheck Protection Program. That and the little 1,200 that was sent to everybody, which was like another $500 billion, was the 1 trillion that the people got. Never mind that the bank got their trillions amongst just a few banks to make more money with. So out of that money that the people got, the Secretary of the Treasury, Mnuchin, decides that we're not going to tell you who we're loaning that money to. Let's think about this. This guy worked for Goldman Sachs. Then he goes in the Secretary of Treasury.
Drain
and he
the
gets
swamp.
$500 million to give to people he won't tell you who he released it to. I don't know how you feel about that, but that sounds a little bit undemocratic, un-American, I don't know. He sounds a little bit more equal in front of the law than we do.
It sounds like a drained swamp to me.
Yeah, I mean what is it? This is like a deep undergrowth. What is this? Like, what is this? I saw one drain the swamp. Wait a minute. This is a biosphere created and it must be maintained and preserved.
Yeah, he's developed.
Preserve the swamp.
Yeah, so let's see. The Trump administration doesn't plan to release details of the companies that received billions of dollars through the high-profile federal Corona relief initiative. See, it's because of Corona we have to loan this company's money. Trump administration believes names of borrowers from the Paycheck Protection Program and the amounts they receive are proprietary and confidential. Okay, so they printed this money at the Federal Reserve, or else they took Treasury bonds, which means it was your future children. They're borrowing from your children to prop up these companies, yet they're not going to tell you who they're taking this money for. And what did we say, 350 million in America? There's 500 billion just for this little part.
And 100,000 small businesses went out.
Yeah. It turns out that
More than 1 million people out of jobs.
and I want you to remember this part. These applications, these loans, this half $500 billion that they're not going to tell you who the borrowers are, it's forgivable if they meet certain criteria. Think about that. The loan is not a loan then. It's a grant. That means they're basically taking this money. Obviously, Congress voted for it, and they said, yes, it's a pandemic. We have to do it, just like with the housing bubble in 9/11. It's this panic condition. People are going to die. How many? Rattle, rattle, rattle. Put the mask on. Be afraid. And, so more money. And this isn't going to be the last time. This is not going to be the last stimulus of this. But the applications for the PPP loans, which, like I said, are forgivable if the borrowers meet certain criteria, say the data will automatically be released. Moreover, the Small Business Administration, which oversees the lending program, told Bloomberg News in April that such loan-specific information would be made public. So we've been told this whole time that they're going to make it public, that they weren't. But now it turns out they're not. The apparent reversal on the disclosure comes amid troubling signs for oversight of the $2.2 trillion pandemic relief package that Congress approved in the March version. The Government Accountability Office, which is responsible for preparing a required report on the spending by the end of June, has requested loan data from the PPP and separate program for economic disaster loans, but has not been told when that request will be honored. This I think is something that is worth shaking a cage for. If you're for transparency and such,
shake your cage.
You got to let them know. Maybe you can lift it off the ground a little bit, because that's what it's like. May shake their cage. I don't know what it is, but
it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, you wait for your $1,200, and they just watered down the economy to give you it, but you don't care because times are hard, and you got your cut. These guys, they're a little bit more equal than you. A little bit more equal.
Not all animals are equal.
Yeah. So I don't know what they're talking about, but
well, we're down to about a minute or so left here for the KPFT version of the show. We're always thankful that we get to broadcast, even during this pandemic. When I was in Mexico, these guys on different sides of Houston, we still kept recording. We're going to keep recording. We're hoping to come back to the studio soon so we can take phone calls and just be there and the good place that KPFT is. But until
watch the Fed, everything they're buying, they're propping up. It's going to not near the bottom. Corporate bond bubble's going to burst.
And we got so much more news. We're again hoping for a second hour
bursting at the
show.
seams.
And stay tuned if you're watching. We're going to cover a couple more stories, and we're going to go to a song real quick. Johnny, this is No Effects. Tell everybody a little bit about this before I.
This song's called Regaining Unconsciousness, and I just feel like the last verse is pretty strongly worded.
All right, well, we're going to go to that. All right, thank you so much for listening to Freethinker Radio, 90.1 KPFT Houston.
Thank you.
Peace.
First they put away the dealers, keep markets safe and off the streets. Then they put away the prostitutes, keep married men close good at home. Then they shoot away the bombs, and they beat it back to queers, turned away asylum seekers, fed us suspicious and fears. When they make a fuss, it's funny there was no one left to notice when they came for us. Looks like witches are in season. You better fly your flag and be aware of anyone who might fit the description. Diversity is now our biggest fear. Now with our conversations tapped and our differences exposed, how you supposed to love your neighbor with our minds that couldn't close with to worry about Big Brother. Now we've got a big father and an even bigger mother. And you still believe this aristocracy gives a fuck about you? They put the mark in democracy and you swallowed every hook. The sad truth is, you'd rather follow the school to the net. Cause swimming alone at sea is not the kind of freedom that you actually want. So go back to your crib and suck on a tit. Bask in the warmth of your diaper. You're sitting in shit and piss while sucking on a giant pacifier. A country of adult infants, a legion of mental midgets. A country of adult infants, a country of adult infants, all regaining their unconsciousness.
Drink now.
All right, we're back. Hey,
Where's my fajitas?
I know.
Where's my
what's up with
margaritas?
that?
I want some bean dip.
Bean dip. Yeah, I could go for some bean dip.
Yes, all of that sounds really good. Thank you guys for.
It is interesting.
What's your bean
People
dip?
are
damn,
noting
I gotta
the
think about
higher prices of silver. I've been hearing this across a lot of the silver platforms, different, I guess you could call them vlogs or whatever that I watch regarding the silver market. And yeah, the premiums are higher than I've seen as a buyer over the last couple of decades. So,
And there was one story we didn't cover online, just I guess as a heads up to anybody who is using hand sanitizer like crazy. There's this FDA warning
9.
that 9 different hand sanitizer brands. What is it? They have some dangerous ingredient. Or,
Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
According to
methanol. Yeah.
Methanol?
Fatal
I
ingredient.
see that in all.
U.S.
a lot of them.
FDA is warning people not to use certain hand sanitizer products because they contain methanol, a toxic substance, when absorbed through the skin or ingested. Methanol is toxic alcohol that is industrially.
So you can use them on your
solvent.
hands, but you have to have gloves on.
It's used as a solvent, a pesticide, and a alternative fuel source. Significant exposure to methanol can result in nausea, vomiting, headache, blurred vision, permanent blindness, seizures, permanent
That's what was
damage, and
happening
death.
at work.
The FDA is asking consumers to stop using these hand sanitizers and dispose of them immediately. And those include, I'll put the brands on the picture on the screen, All Clean Hand Sanitizer, ESK, Biochem, Clean Care, No Germ, Lava. I mean, these sound.
Some of them try to sound good, right? Clean care, no germ, right?
The Good Gel.
Yeah.
Like, oh
not
yeah,
so
I'll get
much.
that one. That sounds
It's a
good.
good gel.
You gotta look a little deeper. But you
Yeah.
know, I think one of the reasons to mention
Dude.
this is just the runaway mask, runaway staying clean mentality.
I'm sure,
You gotta, even that doesn't keep you safe. You could be getting some side
I'm
effects.
sure a lot of people are trying to make a quick buck and cutting corners on different products. you
What's
know.
interesting though, the last line, I'm laughing, but it's not really funny. It says those exposed to these hand sanitizers that contain methanol should seek medical care immediately. So I mean, and you just think about like you're saying, the people who've been really scared, who've just been like
Bathing
in everything and like
I mean,
squirting it on their clothes and
they're in the
breathing it
worst
and
shape right
injecting
now.
it.
They can't sleep. They don't watch Free Thinker Radio, I don't think.
No, they probably would get scared.
Don't drink the Yeah, can we start a hand sanitizer challenge? For
I know
president?
you wanted to go into that Fed one, Micah. So if you want to cover that while we're still here, you can.
Oh yeah, I mean, we can. I do think it's important because I mean, I keep pushing the point that in the background the entire time, the actual deep control of our future, our children's future, even just people now. We look how much. I mean, in the 90s, gold was around $300 an ounce, and now it's at $1,780 an ounce just through steady inflation. In a sign that the Federal Reserve is growing increasingly desperate to jumpstart the economy, the Fed's secondary market credit facility has begun purchasing individual corporate bonds. And I think we need to think about that because basically this one group of people, the private Federal Reserve, is now purchasing corporate bonds. These are bonds like issued by companies. This isn't helping the people. This is buying companies. They're buying up companies. A private bank is buying American companies.
Which is really dangerous if it gets to a certain point. Is it not?
I think it's very dangerous and very, I don't know, because why do they get this extra right? Because in a way, okay, they're watering down everybody's money. So you're talking about killing grandma with the COVID, but you're not caring about killing her savings by watering it down with every stimulus. You don't care that the Federal Reserve is bailing out failure corporations. That one study I saw said 19% of American companies were zombie companies at this point, meaning their servicing their debt outstrips their profit. They're being held alive by stimulus only.
I saw Boeing got a huge chunk of that money, and they still laid off 7,000 employees.
Yep.
So I don't know.
It's crazy because they're not tied to anything. The bond purchasing initiative, like all Fed initiatives, will fail to produce long-term prosperity. These purchases distort the economy by increasing the money supply and thus lowering interest rates. So when they're hungry for money, they print more instead of having to go to someone who has money and pay you more for your savings account or pay you for a savings bond or pay anything. In this case, the Fed's purchase of individual corporate bonds enables select corporations to pursue projects for which they could not otherwise have obtained funding. You see what I'm saying? It gives them an unfair competitive advantage over those who don't receive purchasing of their bonds. This distorts the signal sent to the market, making these companies seem like better investments than they actually are, thus allowing these companies to attract more private investment. This will cause the companies to experience a Fed-created bubble. Like all Fed-created bubbles, the corporate bond bubble will eventually burst, causing businesses to collapse, investors to lose their money unless they receive a government bailout, and workers to lose their jobs. Under the law creating the lending facilities, the Fed does not have to reveal the purchases made by the new facilities. This is just like what we were talking about with the PPP loan. They don't have to tell
They
you.
don't have to tell you anything about anything.
Yeah, and they don't have to have any money there either.
Just trust us.
Well, and
we've
you know,
been,
this
we've been
is
doing good stuff so far.
the
Look
crazy
at the
thing to
economy.
me about this, Micah, is that like, so we were involved in Occupy Houston when it happened in 2010, 11. The Houston Freethinkers, we were working with these, you know, with them, partnering together, and people were talking about Wall Street. They're talking about the 1%. They were talking about the banks. People were divesting. None of that's around anymore. Like, nobody's talking about divesting from banks. Nobody's even paying attention to the banks. Obviously, talking about police violence, institutional racism.
When am I getting my
all
check?
these things, you know? But now, like, because of the shutdown, the lockdown, people are out of work. Some people are going to become dependent on the government money, that $1,200 or whatever the next one is. They already
Or the
talking
new
about
job
that.
training that they're
I
talking
heard-
about.
I heard-
Or they're going to get a contact
I
tracer
heard-
job, you know?
I heard on NPR they were opening up some kind of government jobs. They're like, oh, well, there'll be 250,000 jobs for all of these people in the government. I'm like, what kind of weird situation are we really
They
walking
make
into?
people dependent.
Everyone's working on Amazon or the government or Walmart.
You're either working for the major corporations.
because the small
or
ones are
the
getting
big
bled
government.
out right now. That's what I'm scared
I'd
of.
like to just wrap this Fed thing up real quick, at least as far as the article goes, because you know, one thing we were talking about before, obviously back in Occupy time, and people being upset and wanting to do something about it, and it got to the point where many people invested in different things: silver, gold, Bitcoin, land, seeds, etc., and quit holding savings in Federal Reserve notes. Yet there's still a cash crunch. But I think one of the options that we brought up then, and I don't know if it's, you know, how valid it is as an option, but people need to think about this being equal before the law thing, and these other people being a little more equal. They get to go to the trial, the fake money trial quicker than you do. Instead of allowing the Fed to hide the information and allowing Munchen to hide the information, Congress should maybe audit the Fed so people can know whether a company is flush, in which case with cash, because private investors determined it is a sound investment, or because the Fed chose to invest in the bonds. Think about it, because the market doesn't even know who to invest in anymore. They're just following the Fed. The Fed could and likely will use the bond buying program to advance political goals. The Fed could fulfill Chairman Jerome Powell's stated desire to do something about climate change by supporting green energy companies. The Fed could also use its power to reward businesses that, for example, support politically correct causes, refuse to sell guns, require their employees and customers to wear masks, promote unquestioning obedience to the warfare state. Another of the new lending facilities is charged with purchasing the bonds of cash-strapped state and local governments. This could allow the Fed to influence the policies of these local governments. It is not wise to reward spendthrift politicians of the federal bailout. Think about this. New Jersey, think of the last few years, how many states we talked about can't afford their pension plans. They can't afford obligations they made that now it's going to be passed off to the whole American people. You might not have agreed with what they voted for in California. Well, before, only California had to pay. Maybe you didn't. They didn't agree with what we did in Texas. Maybe you didn't agree with everything that happened in New York. But when they can't pay their bill and they get this bailout, guess what? You just bought it anyway. And in a way, isn't that taxation without representation? You didn't get to vote for those things. Oh, yeah.
We're so far past that.
Yeah. I think it's important to put it forward because,
Yes,
you know, otherwise there's no solution except being frustrated with it. The only way Congress can avoid the Fed causing another Great Depression is to begin transitioning to a free market monetary system by auditing, ending the Fed. I mean, they're the source of the problem. They're the ones that each time are giving the elite more and more money. And who pays the contract tracers? Who pays the military? Where's this money come from? The government is not creating value and selling you products. The money's coming from them making treasury bonds that the Fed buys with printed up notes, and boom, the politicians don't even have to raise taxes or get voted out of office, and the new thing happens. This is why I think that we really need to look at the Fed, keep our eyes on it. It is part of the biggest problem that there is. You don't like police violence? When they come to bail out these municipalities that can't even pay the pension on police, that's just going to tell them, the municipalities, you did the right thing. Go ahead, hire some more. And when you can't afford their pensions in the future, we'll get you. We got your back this time. I mean, it's like the bully. If you give them your lunch money, why would they stop?
Yeah, and I think that most of this audience, I think, probably is coming to the realization, if they haven't already, many of us in the last couple months, that this COVID-19, a big part of it, I don't want to say, I'm not here to, I don't believe it's completely fake. I know some of the audience does. I don't believe that.
Central banks around the world are doing the same thing.
I think that it's obviously being used as a cover for what the Fed's been doing prior to COVID, and now they're using COVID as a way to, like, hey, pump more money into these different places, and it's for the recovery, but you can't tell you where it's going or who it's going to, and we're going to pop up hospitals, and people are going to make millions of dollars, and we're going to close them down, and like, there's just so much crap going on, and I don't know, it's hard because some people still don't see it, man. I mean, we've been talking about this lately more and more, that we're like increasingly living in different worlds. Like, we're just living in different worlds from different people, and that's not even to say that we all think the same, even here on the show or the people in the audience. We have different thoughts, but there are certain things that it seems like a crowd of people, like, these are things you either question or you don't. And then if you don't question them, then your perception of everything else is totally different, because if you're not questioning the shit, then you're just buying into every part of it, and you're like, okay, mask. Yeah, sure. Immunity passports, vaccines. And I made a post about this. Some people gave me shit saying I was making an unfair comparison, but I was basically saying the argument for masks is just like the argument for vaccines. Like, people are saying, like, okay, I'm going to get vaccinated and that's going to make me safe. But if you don't get vaccinated, then I'm not safe because there might not be herd immunity. So, and if you don't get the vaccine, then you're selfish. You're not thinking about everybody else, the greater good. Okay, well, I'm going to wear a mask because it's going to protect me and other people potentially. But if you don't wear a mask, then that could potentially get other people sick. So you're selfish. And, it's very much a very similar argument, even if it's not the same action per se. And I just think that if you can force people to wear a mask, if you can force them to carry around pieces of paper, which they've already done in France and other places like Western nations, they're doing this. We've got stories about Bahrain and other Gulf states.
Germany a long time ago.
When they've been doing it in Italy, they've been doing it in France, and some of the Gulf states recently got caught using their apps to track people, their contact tracing apps that they keep telling us are anonymous. And I mean, it's fucking crazy that people don't see what is going on. But at the same time, and this is where we were getting earlier, Johnny, I think that those of us who choose to be a part of that whoever that is, like, that feels strongly about this, need to speak up, and or at least I think that it's on us to try to speak up in whatever ways, whether that means to our friends, our family, online, because, and we were talking about this earlier, like, if you're not out there in your particular, scene and community in the area, in Houston, just as an example, then there's no other voice that's even saying, hey guys, maybe there's something else going on.
It's kind of crazy, man, because this is the time. This is the time. The next, 10 years or so, next, 2 years, it's really whatever's going to happen is going to happen. The event already unfolds. So, like, whatever we say or do now, that's what we're going to be. We're going to be 10 years from now, 15 years from now. We're going to be looking back at ourselves saying, what did I do during this time? And, like, if you feel compelled to do something, well, maybe you should do it.
I think now is probably the time we might have a brief window to just try to communicate with people. And I've been pushing this idea of, like, just calling truth street teams, just, doing what we used to do before, info jamming, and just whether you have an official group or not, or you're just one individual. I seen this guy on my Twitter account. He's been tweeting at me, showing me, he printed out flyers with, like, QR codes to different documentaries and, like, look up these journalists and these websites. And he's like, I talked to 30 people on my break yesterday while I was at work. He just went out to the streets and started talking. I mean, we're at that point.
We need our army of contact tracers.
Yeah, exactly. They're building an army. We need to build an army of truth tellers and people who are going to challenge the narrative. And like you said, it's either where this goes. It really depends on what we do today. And if you have kids or want to have kids, whatever future they grow up in, and we're shaping it right.
And there's so many ways into the conversation. Sometimes it's frustrating because we end up in an argumentative frame that we didn't really mean to end up in an argumentative frame. But also there's other times where we can say something productive, and we were talking about this before the show, that kind of feeds the dialogue that feeds society forward, rather than just get caught up disputing the same BS facts where someone isn't hearing the facts and they're hitting you down with, well, Fauci said, or the CDC said, but you say, look, the CDC's contradicted itself, or but what about these stats? Or what about the principle of the thing?
Yeah, I definitely think Facebook's almost lost.
Instead of actually moving forward, I don't know.
In person, you have a lot more chance for openness because you can actually see someone's face and someone's eyes, and you have more of a sense of who they are. If you're handing out, and one time Derrick and I were on the 4th. You don't even have to have a conversation with the person if the flyer has info on it.
You can hate
on the 4th of July. We were just saying Happy 4th of July and handing out all kinds of info about the government.
You can hate the world on Facebook and then go out there and start passing out flyers and feel better about it. That's something to remember, that actually people are less distant and less like just set in a point of view when you talk to them individually. I think maybe there are a lot of troll army, and also maybe there's just a lot of keyboard warriors that don't think things out. They get out and just be like, and they feel super aggressive and they feel like they just shut someone down, but never mind winning an argument. Never mind persuading someone.
Never mind society.
They just shut someone down that doesn't want to talk to them anymore,
Yeah, and it's, also a lot of what we're dealing with, I think, too, is like credentialism and freaking, appeals to authorities, right? Because
don't ask the Secretary of Treasury what he did.
So much of this of what we're dealing with, people are like, well, you're not a doctor, you're not a scientist, like you're not Dr. Peter Hotez, who's the dean of this, and so clearly they are just doing this for the good of humanity, and you're just some crazy person on the internet who thinks they know what's going on. So I'm going to listen to this person, and if they tell me masks are okay, if they tell me this vaccine's sick, then that's what I'm going to do.
Do you think this is probably the way humans have been always? Only now these leaders, or whatever you want to call them, these mouths, have the ability to reach so many more of them.
They've had a longer time to study it.
Because, these kings and queens in Europe, that's pretty whacked out stuff they were telling people. And this Montezuma guy and the human sacrifice, that stuff's pretty whacked out. And when I look across cultures, there's lots of people following lots of whacked out ideas all through history. So I start wondering, it's just part of nature of like many humans to be followers. So you have to say, you were talking about people expressing their point of view. So you have to say something good. You have to say something persuasive that they can follow, so they can follow it. You see what I'm saying? They have to understand so they can follow it. They can't. I don't know. I think that might be something. Maybe we have to go with the fact that they are somewhat want to fit in. They want to find a clique. They want to feel at home. Well, what feels more at home than advancing the good of humanity, not like just some blank group good, but something. I just think we have the moral high ground in a way, and that we need to figure out how to exploit that.
Yeah. I think you're right, but also
as well,
we're living in a world though where like this, when that's what I was kind of saying about the fracturing, where like right doesn't even, like, there is no fucking truth, it's to a certain degree, like, and the CIA wanted this. They wanted it to where people can't tell truth, fact from fiction, and the people who just take what the official sources.
Grab in one hand and put it 2 ounces of gold in the other, and tell me which one's true.
No, I know how to research. I use Google and Snopes. You got your fake. That's literally what Johnny had somebody tell him.
But it doesn't change reality. It just changes social reality.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I'm saying is we can hold this. We know that we're being lied to. We got the facts to prove it. Just because the masses won't fucking listen doesn't make it not truth. But if they're the ones that have the guns and have control, they can, force the reality to the point. Like, for example,
that's not very scientific of them.
I've read about like after Franco took over in Spain, right, and he slaughtered a lot of the people that were the counter-revolutionaries, right, and for decades up until like the fall of him, basically, and I think they said the 80s or 90s, the people who were the victims of it, they had a name for them. I can't remember what they called them, but they could never talk about like that their grandfather or their uncle had been killed in the purge or whatever, but they had hidden cemeteries that they would go privately and hide and go like pay their respects to. Sometimes they would get caught and they would get purged or whatever, but for a long time you couldn't even acknowledge that what had just happened, that a bunch of people had just gotten taken away, even happened, because to do so would be going against the state, and then you would be taken out. So they had to like,
I think people forget how monolithic these things are, and all it takes is to look, like I said, that half a year ago, Americans would think it's crazy that most Americans were trying to shut down each other's businesses.
It's just a step. It's a step by step, and I think we've seen it in other totalitarian regimes. And it's one lie at a time. And I honestly believe that. I think if you look into Andrew Soldier Nixon's work in the Gulag Archipelago, he said everyone was lying to each other during the communists, during like the 1940s and stuff, while the people were just getting taken from their homes, and everyone would say, even if you were getting taken, you wouldn't put up a fuss because there must have been some kind of mistake. I didn't do anything wrong. Oh, well, they're going to be able to clear this up as soon as I get to it, and I can just explain calmly. I don't want to make a scene and make everything worse. So he described how everyone just allowed this to happen and watched their neighbors being taken away. And so it's a step-by-step process, and we have to be aware. And if we're not aware, then it's going to happen.
Well, and it's crazy how, like, what you were saying, it's like just
mind
wanting
control.
to be polite and like, well, I don't want to cause a disruption. Like, and I mean,
That was their mentality.
Go along
like
to
what
get
I've
along.
seen, I mean, just like I love my mother, but
Then
since
move
I was a
on.
little kid, I've seen her like submit to authority. Like every time she got pulled over, and I just like even as a young kid, I was like, why does she act that way? But she would immediately kind of just like, oh yes sir, this and that, and sort of like chastise me for questioning them or this and that, and especially as I got into activism. But I think there's a lot of people like that. And that's what you're talking about is like somebody's like, well, I don't want to make a scene, or we'll deal with it later. We'll figure it out later.
It's not going to
I
be
can see
me.
a time.
It's not going to.
But
be
even then,
me.
when it does happen, then people
Because
think they can figure it out.
Think about the false positives.
they'll
Think
work it
about the
out.
false positives that come with these tests. So just say this contacts tracers are in full swing, and you get a false positive, or you're wearing one of those rings on your app, and it says 3 days before you feel anything, you feel fine. You're at your house. And you got a job interview.
Oh, so this is like a good way to see
all
if
this-
you're going to turn yourself
all of a
in
sudden,
3
all of a
days.
sudden, you can't go to your job interview because some guy knocks on your door and says, "Hey, well, we think you're going to be sick in the next 3 days, so you're going to have to come with us in quarantine."
And you have to put more faith in them than your own abilities right there, which is sort of a self-betrayal.
Yeah.
Because you have to accept them when they tell you that you're going to be sick in 3 days, whether you believe it or not. And what if these things start saying you're going to be sick in 3 days, feeling any symptoms or not, report to a blankety blank station?
I've got two things I want to know.
You know what a blankety blank station
We
is.
did have good news too that we didn't cover on the actual radio station. The fact that Colorado passed a qualified, ended qualified immunity. We'll talk about that in just a moment. I just want to mention I put this article out earlier today on Last American Vagabond for those who want to read it.
Basically,
Just another new study pointing to the dangers of geoengineering the climate, which, hey, coincidentally is another project being funded by Bill Gates with his organization, and yet another study to add to the many of the last 10 years that have shown that engineering the weather, imagine this, can have consequences, can have negative consequences.
COVID.
Unforeseen consequences. So I just put that article up.
sure.
I'll share that for anybody who wants to check that. And then I want to just read this briefly. This is something I put on Facebook earlier, and I want anybody who finds this intriguing. This is from actually one of my articles about Bill Gates, but I just try to turn it into a couple bullet points. And I just asked my Facebook audience, does anybody find any of the following facts odd? Do they strike you as odd? And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll just summarize it because we've already talked about most of it. But on October 18th, 2019, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation partnered with Johns Hopkins Center and the World Economic Forum for a high-level pandemic exercise known as Event 201. And it simulated how the world would respond to a coronavirus. And it simulated 65 million people dying, mass lockdowns, quarantine, censorship of alternative viewpoints under the name of fighting disinformation. And it even discussed the idea of arresting people who question the pandemic narrative. Some of the people involved with the Event 201 include the World Health Organization's Dr. Michael Ryan, who coincidentally is now teaming up is heading up the response to COVID-19. And he's the guy you guys may have heard of who called for going into families and isolating people and taking them from their families and things of that sort.
From the WHO?
Yeah, World Health Organization, Dr. Michael Ryan, who is also involved with Event 201. So then you have that. That's one fact, right? Then the Rockefeller Foundation in 2010, they imagined a similar scenario under their document called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. And it includes a scenario called Lockstep, which describes a pandemic sweeping the world and resulting in more authoritarian control from governments in developed countries. And this is how they describe it. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. And the document goes on to predict that scanners using advanced functional MRI technology become the norm at airports and other public areas to detect abnormal behavior that may indicate antisocial intent. And this kind of lines up with recently the TSA announced that they are now going to be checking temperatures at all airports. The largest airline organization has said that they're going to start implementing immunity passports soon. And the document from the Rockefellers goes on to describe that civil unrest would begin. They say by 2025, people seem to be growing weary of such top-down control and letting leaders and authorities make choices for them. Wherever national interests clashed with individual interests, there was conflict. Sporadic pushback became increasingly organized and coordinated as disaffected youth and people who had seen their status and opportunities slip away, largely in developed countries, began inciting civil unrest. And so just two bits of information related to the Rockefellers and Bill Gates. And what I wrote here is that, I think it'd be short-sighted to ignore these pieces of information and dismiss them as simple coincidence, because when you understand the history of the Rockefellers, which goes back to the early 20th century, and now the Gates Foundation, they have been funding global healthcare for decades, for over a century now. And there's a good image that's in my article on Bill Gates showing Bill Gates, connection to Fauci, connecting to the guy who put out the model at the Imperial College of London, all these different things, these sources that we're hearing about, funded from this web of
all back
people.
to 201.
Yeah, and then people connected to Event 201. I mean, so just to discount these things would be crazy. And thankfully, but I'm talking to people on my page, right? I might be speaking into mostly an echo chamber. But that's the kind of things that I feel like it's hard to say all that to somebody on the street, right? But, maybe we could pass them a flyer and say, research Event 201. Here's a QR code that's not going to track you, but it'll lead you to a documentary, or that'll lead you to this short video or something.
I think what you're saying is very important. And not just for the particular trouble, crazy world we find ourselves in, but if you remember a long time ago, one of the things that when you, me, Kyle, and a number of other HFT members first began to get together is that we'd all started doing random stuff like that. And I imagine when you're talking to the echo chamber, in a sense, for lack of a better word, we love all of you people out there. But the point is, a lot of you probably feel the same frustration that Derrick's talking about as far as trying to connect with people. But think of how you felt when you first, when you're out there looking for pieces and you see that everything isn't right, and then you see something that kind of connects with something that you already recognize, and it seems so underground and kind of like some guy giving you the secret here, and then you go read it and it's like what you knew all along, but it leads to another thing that you have to research. I think that's part of what we have to do, and that's just what happens when you're not in the majority view, when you're not just out there believing the mainstream stories. When you're reflecting and thinking, you're gonna be in a particular way a minority, and in a way all your friends are going to be weirdos, and they're going to have some of the same ideas as you do. But then once you start recognizing that, you'll feel stronger in reaching people, and you'll remember how important those moments were to you, and then you'll be able to create similar moments for other people, whether it's through a vlog, through flyers, through a song, or whatever it is, because all of us felt like the world was insurmountable, all this craziness was too much, and then we saw a little bit of light somehow, somewhere. Like, oh, this one crazy guy said something that made me think.
Yeah, I mean, I continue to do this stuff after 10 years because I do think that there's some hope to be found, that there are people who are just starting to question things. That's the crazy thing to think about, like right now, someone who's just like starting to go down the rabbit hole,
wake-her-uppers, though, right? I mean, in a sense, it's so crazy when they do these crazy things like 9/11 or the banker bailout
People are like, all right, I was on the fence.
Yeah.
I'm off the fence.
Because I think they can't control it all. They try to, but they don't know everyone's reactions. They don't live like we do, like the normal people. So they don't know. I mean, yeah, they got all kinds of PhDs to study us. And
well, I want to share, like, since we're talking about this kind of, I think, more positive train of thought here, I shared this comment with you guys earlier. I'm going to just show it on the screen here. And hopefully you guys can see it all right. This guy just sent me this message, and it says, hey, man, I followed you for a while now. I've been, blah, blah, blah. I just want to read the main part. He says he's just beginning to wake up. So kind of like what we're talking about, just beginning to wake up. But I'm really wanting to message about his personal. He's saying, he's just complimenting me. But really the thing is he's saying his eyes are starting to open up. I can feel, I want to thank you. Please keep up the good work. I pray someday freedom cells take off. Like this just sort of message that people are starting to wake up, starting to question things. They're looking for hope. He's looking for friends, that feeling that people feel alone. he's struggling with mental health, is struggling with this. Like, this is real life things that people are going through right now with all this chaos. Like, I can't even imagine waking up right at this moment and trying to figure out what the hell is going on, because it feels so chaotic right now. And this is like 9/11 was an event that happened in one day, right? Obviously the repercussions played out and still are playing out, but this is like some crazy shit in slow-mo. Like, we're just watching it happen. And like, those of us who are paying attention, like, guys, do you see what is fucking down the road, like 10 blocks away? And people are like, no, just put the mask on.
Here it comes.
And I think that's really important, because I feel like this event, the hit is deep, and it's going to be years. It's going to be years of stuff unfolding, right? Not just years
It's
of
never
the
going to go
effect
back
of
to
it,
normal.
but years of the stuff they try to keep piling onto this one.
Yeah, it's just going to keep coming on, man. I mean, it's just like, think about how many we've talked about.
Maybe
this too.
the disease will become a terrorist.
Well, they've talked about basically that we're going to be in waves.
On it could be.
We're going to be in waves for years, is what they keep saying. That there's going
Viral
to just be
terrorists.
continuous waves that'll keep coming out. And I remember months back, I did a video about this. MIT put out a study, and they were saying, like, the only way we're going to be able to stop this is a period, and we might have even talked about on the show, like, lock them down for a couple months. Then once things calm down, let people out. Then once the virus comes back, lock people down.
You're
Like,
grounded
they talked
again.
about that, like doing it in waves. They said up to 2 years or so, where just back and forth. And
On your back, on your belly.
and it's just, I think it is conditioning people to take whatever. And
Put the mask on.
where
If
people-
Tate puts the mask on his face again.
people are going to get so worn down they will accept, but also some people will push back. Which, speaking of, somebody invited me. I might be here in town. I'm supposed to head back to Mexico next weekend, but July 4th in Austin, they're having a Freedom from Tyranny rally at the Capitol. People just who are kind of against lockdowns and things. And that's interesting. I don't know, it's going to probably get framed as a right-wing thing.
If you're against lockdowns, yeah.
But I hope nobody has a haircut sign.
I've also got, like, just as an example, a friend of mine is in Colorado, and Colorado, I don't know if you guys have heard, it is actually still been pretty locked down. Like, they have been, I think, parts of Colorado, and I know Callie is listening. She's from Colorado. That we have some friends who are putting on a music festival, basically encouraging. I'm going to put it on screen. It's called Free the People Fest, and it says, and I like the way the angle they're taking here, because to me it seems like this is kind of it's aimed at being nonpartisan, right? So it says, it's got people of all colors holding on to each other. It says, free the people. Today we make our declaration. Today we stand united against government lockdowns, against censorship, racism, hate, violence, and corruption. Today we come together with music and food as one race, one people, to stand in unity. Together with all brothers and sisters, celebrate truth, love, and freedom with us. Like, just putting an event like that on at the park on July 4th, food, and like, that's the kind of shit that I think is important, because, and the fact that, yes, they're saying we're against racism, we're against the corruption, we're against the lockdowns, we're against censorship. And I feel like if you can bring people under that, like, which is a pretty wide banner, but also I don't see how
it should just be the basis of society.
I don't see how
right?
people can get offended by any of that,
Yeah.
but I mean, surely somebody will, right? But I mean, this is what I'm saying.
Well,
They didn't
the
say no
lockdown
Nazis.
The lockdown, that's going to set off.
Yeah,
a lot
some
of
people be like, oh my God, they're against lockdown. So that'll trigger some people. But I think to those who are thinking about it, and again, I've had people on my Facebook page the last couple of days saying, like, you know what, I'm one of these people that they keep saying are at risk for getting COVID. I'm immunocompromised. I'm this and that, and I don't want the government locking people down to keep me safe.
Yeah,
I can take care of myself.
more.
I've seen like on the Conscious Resistance page on Facebook, I made a post about that. And there's, and of course, I'm sure there's people who are, hey, I'm immunocompromised, and I do want them to take care of me. But the point is, not everybody who the Karens are trying to speak for, but you're selfish. You don't care about the people who are at risk. Some of those people can take care of themselves, and they believe in personal responsibility and self-ownership. And they're like, don't fucking lock down society over me, or don't use me as an excuse, at least, that, you're doing it for my benefit when it's some other shit going on.
When I wash my hands and stay in. It's been a fun show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just last things, guys, is that that Colorado story, I'll just show it on screen. That's awesome news. Again, we got friends in Colorado, so congratulations to everybody who is involved in this this activism and putting this together. Colorado passes historical and revolutionary bill ending qualified immunity for cops, which has been, of course, a big discussion recently. And basically, it's been called long overdue. It's a new bill, and it should allow people to hold cops, accountable if they end up raping, stealing, shooting, abusing people. And we'll see how it goes, because the cops and the unions have argued this will be the end of the police departments. If we had qualified immunity, nobody's going to want to be a
Can't
cop.
rape people anymore.
They're like, if we can't do our job if we are not ensured that if we do something wrong, we can get away with it. I mean, just think about if you went into somewhere, it's like, hey, I'm willing to work for you, But before I start, I need you to guarantee that if I ever do anything wrong, rob for you,
Shooting
steal you,
fleet
beat
That's
you,
what all you
like,
guys
you're not
do,
going to
bro.
hold me accountable.
That's what all
shooting
you
mentally
guys do.
impaired people.
But I mean, just imagine
Shooting
going
people in the
into a
back.
place like just like you as a dog walker, like, hey, we're gonna have to sign a deal. If I ever
If I
kick
lose
your
your
dog,
dog,
If I ever
lose your
throw
dog,
your dog out in traffic and hold him there,
you can't hold me.
I'll put my knee on the back of your dog's neck.
So that's going on, and that's really cool. And then final one.
police can subject Americans to strip searches no matter the offense.
That's not good news, Micah.
Oh yeah, sorry.
One that's kind of good news, mainly good news. If you look it up with the glass half full, U.S. honeybees are doing better for the first time in a couple of years after a bad year.
Police can
It
break
says-
into homes without a
God
warrant.
damn,
even
Micah,
if
you're
it's
ruining the
wrong
fucking
one.
honeybee moment.
Okay.
Even if it's
U.S. honeybee
Just-
colonies have bounced back. I'm trying to give them some good
Okay.
news, goddamn.
The honeybees.
U.S.
The
honeybee
honey
colonies
is
have
good.
bounced back after a bad year. The annual beekeeping survey says beekeepers lost 22% of their colonies this winter, which is still a pretty good chunk, which is lower, though, than the recent average and is the second smallest winter loss in 14 years.
Oh, that
so
is
that's
good.
somewhat promising.
I love honey.
Obviously,
and bees. I've been like totally cool with bees for a long time.
so
Yeah,
yeah, that's what's going on, guys. There's a lot of shit happening in the world. We hope you guys have been entertained or informed.
At least a little bit. We like to have fun.
We do enjoy the audience. We like your comments. We appreciate it. And sorry for the technical difficulties we had early on.
Oh, that was chaos. It was probably the worst ever. But hey, we had to do a lot of new things, and we appreciate all your patience. And I feel like I know some of these people now after watching them for the last few weeks. So thank you again for all your support and for caring about the things that you're caring about and all these different places these people live. And they're having conversations out there with people. I mean, if they're joining us each week, you know they're out there talking to people, their bosses, their coworkers, their neighbors. So yeah, I'm sure we don't agree with everybody on everything, but I think that's like the important part, right? Have the bees, have some good honey, have some laughs, and have some friends despite it all. Because I feel like a big part of it is if we always have to put the mask on and always have to hang our heads and always have to look down, that starts to form a whole new mind and a whole new race of people. And I think maybe that's part of what they want to do. Maybe that's weird, but
Yeah, I appreciate everybody who puts time in listening to this podcast and helps us spread it. Somebody was asking earlier if our podcast on Overcast. I'm horrible at this. If somebody wants to help out at all, somebody asked me, said, "Oh, is a podcast on Spotify and this and that?" We're all very busy. If anybody wants to do some legwork and send us the basic, here's what you got to do, we would love to get this audio not only on the radio in Houston, not only the video, but if we can get it on Spotify. Other places that podcasts are at, let us know. We'll make the effort to make it happen so we can reach more people because that's what we're trying to do here, and we'll keep doing it. All
someone
right,
says it's the best chat they've been in a long time. Yay, that makes me feel happy. We have to go to boring, hard work later. Bye. See ya.
all right, guys, we're out of here. Till next time. Peace.
Peace.